The Sound of Magic, Book 1, Chapter 1. Clang! I sprang to my feet at the sound of the dismissal bell and raced out of the classroom before the ringing stopped. My grandmother, Grand Louise, had asked me to be home on time. Not under or over, on time. Right after school, mumselle, Grand Louise had stressed through pursed lips. Whenever she used the sassy French word for Missy, I knew she meant business. I'd heard particular words, sayings, and stories from my grandmother for the better part of my 11 years. Grand Louise was from the Mother Isles, a cluster of tropical islands off the mainland, and she kept her traditions alive. This was Tropiville, after all. Every islander who settled here brought their culture with them. As I darted to my locker, I passed bright, splashy posters in the hallway. The posters announced auditions for my favourite Tropiville tradition, the Islanders' Day Karnival. Karnival was a huge celebration where top bands played and squads of dancers dressed in masquerade costumes leapt and spun through the streets. Tropiville kids were allowed to perform at Karnival, but they had to audition first. My dance audition was the next day, although my parents wanted me to try out as a musician instead. But I was a dancer, and the audition was my chance to prove it. I even planned to wear a special costume during my tryout. Grand Louise would help me make it, if I was home on time. As the other sixth graders from my class reached their lockers, I slammed mine shut and headed for the door. Just as about to exit, I saw my classmate April. She stood wide with her hands on her hips, blocking my way. "What's the rush, Josie?" April sing-songed, a sneer on her lips. April was a dancer too, and ever since she'd found out that I was auditioning for Karnival, she'd been treating me like her rival. The way I saw it, there was room for both of us. Weren't we all Tropivillers? "Getting ready for my dance audition. Good luck at yours," I said. With one fast dart, I sidestepped her and raced outside. The fresh breeze cooled my face, and the afternoon sun tickled my skin. I smiled. All of Tropiville rumbled with rhythm, and I fell right into step with it. I walked over a sidewalk grate, blowing warm subway air, and marvelled at the familiar jostle of the arriving train. My long, lanky strides gobbled up 2 whole blocks before I heard the unmistakable tuck-tack, tuck-tack rhythm of double Dutch ropes. Some girls were jumping in a church parking lot. I could practically taste the excitement of being between the ropes. "Can I get a jump?" I asked. "Hop in," said the girl standing close to me. "Squee!" I shouted as I jumped in. Everyone burst out laughing. I knew that Grand Louise was waiting, but this wouldn't take long. Besides, my famous speed walking would help me make up for the lost time. For now, I was in the ropes playing with gravity. I kept a steady 1-2, 1-2 rhythm as I skipped over each rope. It felt like dancing, and it sounded like April's voice. "Don't mess up!" she yelled. Mid-skip, I caught April's smirk. She sliced through my concentration and tripped up my rhythm. In a heartbeat, my steady 1-2, 1-2 pace became 1-2, ouch! I stumbled and landed all wonky on my ankle. I swallowed the cry of pain wobbling on the tip of my tongue. I didn't want to cause a scene. I definitely didn't want anyone making a big deal out of this. Plus, I didn't want to give smug April the satisfaction. "Thank you," I said, waving to the double Dutch team, like my ankle wasn't totally throbbing. "Are you sure you're okay?" asked one of the turners. I nodded and forced a smile. I didn't make eye contact with April as I headed out of the parking lot and continued home. I walked much slower, thanks to my aching ankle. I had a terrifying thought. If walking made me wince, how much worse would dancing feel? Would this heal by tomorrow? What if it didn't? If I missed my dance audition, my parents would want me to try out for the band's horn section instead. I would never get to prove myself as a dancer. My heart sank under the weight of my thoughts. The only positive thing I could think of was that Grand Louise would take one look at my limp and forgive my tardiness. Honk honk! A car waited at the stoplight, pulled my attention away from my troubles. From the large grey afro, it was easy to tell who was driving. My neighbour, Madame Laroche, was behind the wheel and shouted out to me. "Josie, Josie, with so much flair," she sang, crooning one of Gran Louise's most famous hits. "Throw a big party and she'll be there," I sang in response, even though I was way off pitch on the second line. I didn't inherit my grandmother's angelic voice, or even my parents' genius musical abilities. Like many Tropivillagers, I loved music, but the way I expressed that love was by dancing to it. The green light ended our street duet, and we waved goodbye to each other. I continued my slow walk home. When I saw Mr. Wilson just ahead, stocking his sidewalk fruit stand with yellow-green mangoes, I took a quick glance at the clock tower further down the avenue. "It's 3:20, Mr. Wilson," I cheerfully reported, before he could ask me for the time, as he did every afternoon. Mr. Wilson reached up a leathery brown hand and tipped his fedora to me. "Thank you, partner," he said. In the English-speaking part of the Mother Isles, that meant partner or pal. I continued limping down the sidewalk until I heard something new. Beyond the rattle of manhole covers, the rumble of the subway, and the melodic tilt of Islanders' chatter, there was a rhythmic thumping that drew me down the street. I winced and picked up my pace, eager to find out where the sound was coming from. There, drumming on the corner of Marley and Hines, was a quiet new kid in my class. I didn't know he was a musician. I stood there watching his fast-moving hands, and I instantly forgot that I had somewhere else to be. Chapter 2. I was going to be late. I had to get to the corner of Marley and Hines and set up before the afternoon school crowd caught up with me. I liked it better when people heard my drumming from blocks away. It drew them in. Plus, I'd always preferred strangers' ears to their eyes. Ears were way less judgy. "Are you settling in okay, Serge?" my teacher, Miss Rodriguez, asked at the dismissal bell. She meant well, but I wish people would stop reminding me that I was a new kid in school. Drumming helped me forget. When I drummed, I didn't think about how much I missed my home on the Mother Isles, or about how much I missed Granny. Miss Rodriguez's over-concerned tone made me think about how much I wanted to go back. My parents didn't know that I was saving for a boat ticket to the Mother Isles. If I kept making tips from drumming, I would eventually have enough. "Understand, Serge?" I hadn't meant to, but I'd missed everything my teacher had said. I nodded wordlessly, shifting my backpack to my opposite shoulder. "Okay then," Miss Rodriguez said, sounding doubtful. "Go enjoy your afternoon." I headed out the classroom door. I grabbed the black cloth bag holding my slim drum, slammed my locker shut, and joined the crowd of students spilling into the street. The skyscrapers in the distance served as perfect markers when I needed to navigate this new city. As long as I walked towards that distant skyline, I knew I was headed west. The rumbling sound beneath the sidewalk startled me. It was only when I saw crowds of people emerging from underground that I remembered there was a subway below the street. There was so much to get used to on the mainland. Here, there were iron lampposts instead of palm trees, and rows of attached sandstone homes painted boring shades of brown instead of the detached, pastel-coloured homes that lined the road I'd lived on with my grandmother. The air flowed from the sidewalk grate, smelled like musty dampness instead of the salty turquoise sea. Raucous laughter and chatter broke out all around me, even though many of the kids at my new school were from the Mother Isle families. Most of them had been born here, in Tropiville. They spoke a snappier English than I was used to, as if they were chomping on tough meat. The worst part was, it felt like they were all on the same jokes, and I just didn't get them. I breezed by a church parking lot, where girls were jumping double dutch. "Squee!" one of them shouted, just as a grey cat with a red collar crossed my path. "Mimi, you have to stop following me like this," I scolded her with a smile. "How did you even get out?" Mimi had been a going-away gift from Granny, who'd raised me when my parents went to live on the mainland years ago. When my parents had finally sent for me, Granny could tell I was sad to leave her. "Take Mimi with you, for comfort and for company," Granny had said. It seemed super important to her, so I had. Once I'd moved here, Mimi had tried to follow me out the door every single time I left. If she couldn't get out, She would sit in a window perch on the lookout until I got back home. She knew more about my comings and goings than my parents did. A few minutes later, I stood at the corner of Marley and Hines. Perfect. I started setting up on the front stoop of a vacant row house. Mimi had padded away down the street, but the moment I pulled out my drum, I didn't feel alone. The familiarity of the hand-carved wooden shell and its braided rope instantly set me at ease. "Nice-looking drum," said a man who reminded me of one of my uncles. He carried groceries from the nearby fruit stand. "That looks like an island-made special," said another passerby, a woman who stopped and stood next to the man. "It is," I said. I was proud of my drum's origins. Every true drummer knew that the trees from the Mother Isles had a high grade of wood that created drums with a distinct and powerful sound. "But you can't be more than 10 years old," said the man. "I'm 11, sir," I told him. Both he and the woman laughed, and I wondered if I'd said something funny. What does a boy your age know about the power of drumming an island tambo? I didn't know how to answer that question. Curious, the man and woman waited and watched. Judgy eyes. "The youth of today, so eager," the man chuckled, shaking his head. Seated on the stoop, I placed the drum between my knees and pulled out my drumsticks. The doubters talked to each other, swapping stories about great drummers they'd known. No one paid too much attention to me. It was the perfect time. With a drumstick in my right hand and left hand empty, I took a deep breath and began. The rhythm started off steady and dependable, but then I sped up the beat and mixed in unpredictable patterns. Stick, stick, slap, stick, slap. The doubters turned toward me, their lips no longer flapping with chatter. I broke out more intricate beats, hitting the drum skin with the heel of my hand for deep sounds and the tips of my fingers to punctuate the rhythm with a higher pitch. A crowd of kids gathered round, and most of them looked surprised to see me drawing this much attention. A few dollar bills landed in my tip jar. The man with the groceries gave me a nod of approval. The woman closed her eyes, letting her ears take over. I was getting more tips than usual. A few more days like this and I would have enough money for my ticket back to the Mother Isles. I was excited to spot a girl from my class, Josie L'Amour, in the crowd. Josie was the granddaughter of the famous Louise L'Amour, Mother Isles singer of English and French songs. The woman was a legend. Josie had musical greatness in her blood, so the fact she was bobbing ahead to my drumming was a huge compliment. Josie moved to the rhythm, but only from the waist up. She shook her shoulders, waved her long arms and threw back her head, all while putting her weight on just one leg. "She can't even dance," shouted a girl in the crowd. I recognised the heckler from school. April always poked fun at my accent. Her brother Ark was at her side, laughing. "And she obviously doesn't know it," Ark snarked. Josie looked at the mean siblings. When her eyes met theirs, she flashed them a taunting smile and danced with her whole body, head to toe. She stumbled and winced, but her feet kept matching my drum beats. I focused on her feet and her movements. It felt like Josie was speaking to my drum, communicating with her steps, her swaying arms and her bobbing head. My drumming got more intense. I delivered an elbow beat on the drum skin to go with the speed drumstick and the bare-handed beats combos, and Josie kept up. It no longer looked like she was wincing in pain. Josie's joy made my hands feel lighter. They moved over the drum quickly, helping me craft tricky beat combos I'd never attempted before. The spectators gave Josie room to dance. As much as my hands communicated with the drum, the beats I pounded out communicated with Josie too. She was drawn to my music, and she wasn't the only one. I couldn't believe that this was happening. I, the new kid in town, was pulling in a crowd. Everyone reacted to my drumming in different ways. Some nodded their heads, and a few more people threw spare change and dollar bills into my tip jar. But one person in particular seemed mesmerised. A tall, gangly, older man, in dress pants and a t-shirt that read Zombies. It was Philip Malvey, a man I'd always wanted to meet. I'd read Karnival history blogs about how he'd founded the famous Zombies, the most popular band in town. Mr. Malvey was gone when I looked up again, and a crew of construction workers had shown up with barricades, orange cones and giant toolboxes. I guess that meant the vacant row house was about to be renovated. "Practice somewhere else, kid," said one of the workers. The crowd around me thinned out and began to move on, and some people gave me fist bumps and pats on the back as they left. For some reason, Josie stayed behind. "I've never heard drumming like that before," she said as I packed up my drum. Then she smiled and said, "I'm Josie." "I know," I said before I could stop myself. Josie's right eyebrow hitched. I should have stopped there, but I heard myself blab on. "And thanks for the compliment. I kind of feel like I learned to drum by listening to your grandmother's old records." Even though it was the truth, I wished I hadn't said it. The last thing I wanted to do was come off as some kind of rabid fan. "It's always cool to meet a fan of Gran Louise," Josie said, unfazed, "especially when that fan is a musician I admire. If you're free, I'd love for you to play for my carnival dance audition after school tomorrow." I was so caught off guard that I didn't know what to say. Josie waited for my answer. "Okay," I finally said. "It's just too bad our practice space is taken." I gestured at the construction workers. "I know a place where we can rehearse," Josie said. "My house. Gran Louise is waiting for me there now." The great Louise L'Amour. "Let's go!" I practically shouted. For the first time since I'd come to Tropiville, I felt excitement churning in my belly. Chapter 3. After Serge and I walked a few blocks, I realised that we hadn't spoken a word to each other. "You're an amazing drummer," I blurted out. "You're an amazing dancer," he said at exactly the same time. We both chuckled awkwardly, but I was glad we were laughing. It was a lot better than silence. "Is your ankle okay?" Serge asked, looking down at my lemon and white sneakers. For a second, it looked as though it might have hurt it. For the first time since the double Dutch stumble, I realised I wasn't limping. "Your drumming seems to have cured it," I joked with an extra hop in my step. "Hey, thanks for agreeing to play at my audition tomorrow," I told him. "I know they'll have a drummer there, but Gran Louise always says, 'Whatever you do in life, make it extra special.' That's why I'm also planning to wear a dazzling costume. Gran Louise is helping with it tonight." "You must be really close to your grandmother," Serge said. "You talk about her as much as I think about mine." "She's my best friend," Serge and I both said at the same time again. We shared another laugh, but Serge's smile melted away to a slight frown. "You miss her," I said. "She raised me." Serge looked at his feet. "I was only 3 when my parents left for Tropiville to look for work. Our family needed the money." I nodded in understanding. I knew a few kids at school who had a parent or sibling on the Mother Isles. People usually sent some of the money they made here to families still living there. "There's nothing I wouldn't give to be back," confessed Serge, his voice full of sadness. "I'm sorry you're missing home," I said, wishing I could make him see all the island vibes right here. Even though it was a busy city and not the relaxed island Serge was used to, Tropiville was still bursting with island culture. "Tell me about your grandmother," I said instead. "Granny loves music as much as I do." Serge twitched his drum from one shoulder to the other. "But my parents, they think playing music is a waste of time." My eyes went wide. "Whoa!" "Yeah," he dropped his head. "They think pursuing music is chasing a dream." "What's wrong with chasing dreams?" I asked. "To them, it's not sensible," Serge explained. "They say they put aside their musical ambitions because that's not real life. Real life is having a stable job, providing for your family. My pops is a dentist, my mum's an accountant, and they want me to be a lawyer." "But my parents are musicians who founded the Top Trops, one of the best bands here," I said. "That must be awesome, having parents who get your love for music," Serge said. "Except that my parents want me to be a musician, not a dancer," I told him. "Imagine the pressure of being expected to perform music when your family includes Gran Louise, who's famous for singing, and parents who created one of the biggest bands in Tropiville." "I guess you can relate," Serge said. "But with your help, I think I can make them understand," I said. "Did you see how you won over the crowd just now? If you play while I dance, my parents will be so impressed with both our performances, they'll realise that I should be dancing." Serge got a faraway look as he thought about what I told him. As we got closer to my house, a bright yellow sign in the window of the corner store caught my eye. They finally have chicken patties. It was usually meat patties every day, and I'd started doubting that Miss Desmond, the store owner, would ever have chicken patties again. But today was the day. Are you hungry? I asked Serge. He looked confused, so I pointed to the yellow sign. Please tell me you've tried these chicken patties, I said. Serge shook his head. That's it. I won't be able to sleep tonight if you don't try this right now, I said. We followed the Junker Junker Island beat of Mr. Desmond's speakers into the store, and I ordered a patty to share. Mr. Desmond cut it into 2 pieces for me, and once we were back outside, I gave Serge half of the patty. Serge accepted it with a hesitant, "Thank you." I knew I hadn't made the patty myself, but I took pride in watching Serge's reaction just the same. He swallowed it in just 2 bites, so I gave him the other half of the patty. I knew that just because Serge liked the mainland patty, it didn't mean he liked Tropiville, but a small part of me felt like it did. "This is amazing," Serge said when there wasn't a crumb left. "How could anyone not like a town that makes a treat that tasty?" I said. "The spices come from the Mother Isles, but it's cooked with a twist of mainland creativity." I was a little too eager to make Tropiville sound as welcoming and friendly as possible, but Serge didn't seem to notice. He was too busy noticing something else. There's a woman up the street who's looking at us like she's about to give us a piece of her mind. She wouldn't be... Serge trailed off. I had to squint to make out the face, but the stance was unmistakable. The bow legs poking out from beneath the purple pleated skirt, the head tilted to one side, the hand on one hip. "Grand Louise," I said. In that moment, I realised I no longer had an achy ankle, so I wouldn't get any sympathy points. And, what time was it? Chapter 4. Josie's grandmother's eyesight wasn't the sharpest. As we got closer, her silhouette stood as still as a statue, but I could tell the moment she recognised her granddaughter. She crossed her arms and shook her head at our approaching figures. "Mumselle, where were you?" she asked Josie. Her colourful bracelets jangled as they slid down her tan arms. From the looks of things, it was probably not a good time to practice at Josie's. I should have excused myself and headed home, but Gran Louise's face kept my feet glued to the concrete. She looked older, but it was still the same face from many of my favourite album covers. Josie started, then stopped. Her eyes shifted right, then left, as if searching for the words that would smooth the creases in her grandmother's forehead. And then Josie's face lit up. "Oh, Gran Louise, you have got to hear Serge play." "Who?" Gran Louise asked, noticing me for the first time. "Serge Francis," I said, giving a respectful nod and a slight smile. Gran Louise's forehead creases vanished. She gave me a friendly smile that turned up the warmth in the air, and she invited me inside. We walked up to the second floor of the row house and entered across from a wall displaying some of Gran Louise's music awards. As soon as I took a seat in the living room, I blurted out, "My grandmother has every one of your albums. She plays them every Saturday." Just thinking about Granny humming along and dancing to Louise L'Amour's songs made my eyes sting a little. I blinked away the memory and cleared my throat. Gran Louise playfully curtsied. "Ah, yes, it's me. Please give my regards to your grandmother and thank her for trusting the power of music." "I will, thank you," I said. "Speaking of the power of music," Josie said, "Serge has it, and then some." "Let's hear it then," invited Gran Louise. She and Josie settled in as I sat up. The breeze from the open window blew the gauzy curtain aside and cooled my face. My hands beat the drumskin and let the rhythm take flight, altering its vibrations as it travelled across the room. By the time I slapped the final beats, I realised my eyes were closed. I heard the applause, but it wasn't just Josie and her grandmother who were clapping. "That was marvellous!" shouted a voice from the street. I went to the window. When I looked down, I saw Mr. Malvey's tall, gangly form standing at the bottom of Josie's front stoop. Gran Louise and Josie joined me. Gran Louise's smile melted into a frown when she saw who it was. "Mr. Malvey," Josie gave him a one-note, blank-faced greeting. What brings you here? I heard the drumming from the street. The sounds came alive and practically yanked me back by the collar, Mr. Mulvey said. What's your name, young man? Serge Francis, I replied. And that was you drumming just a moment ago? I nodded. Serge, my man, I have been in the music industry longer than you've been alive, Mr. Mulvey said, and I've worked with every type of talent out there. So I am not off base when I say that you, my friend, have an extra special skill. Wow, thank you, sir, I said, blown away by the compliment. First Gran Louise, then Mr. Mulvey. Maybe my parents were wrong and I could make a living as a drummer. I am a respected member of the musical community, Mr. Mulvey continued, ignoring Gran Louise's snore, and I have made many careers come to life. That's how I know that you, my friend, would be a great fit for Zombies. You mean the Zombies? I repeated, dazed. Was this really happening? Was he really talking about having me join the best band in town? The very one. I'm sticking my neck out by inviting you to audition. No child has ever been admitted into the band. I won't let you down, sir, I said, trying to make my voice sound deeper than it normally was. Mr. Mulvey crooked a finger at me. Excellent. Come on down here so I can give you my card. I turned to leave and saw both Josie and her grandmother giving me funny looks, but I was in too much of a hurry to ask why. I bolted downstairs where Mr. Mulvey was waiting for me. He reached into his pocket with a long, bony finger and pulled out a purple business card. Here's the address for the audition. Be there tomorrow night at 9, sharp. I took the business card eagerly. Mr. Mulvey gave me a strange smile before he turned and walked away. When I stepped back inside, Josie looked spooked. I overheard what Mr. Mulvey told you. You have to be careful. Rumour around town is that the Zombies band is somehow mixed up with the Lugaloo, she said. What's a Lugaloo? I asked. The Lugaloo is a dangerous spirit, Josie said. It lures kids to its lair in the grot on full moon, when its power is strongest. I've heard that Zombies always practice at the grot. I'd heard of the grot. It was an abandoned part of town full of old warehouses. That's some story, I said, trying to sound intrigued. But I didn't believe in folk tales, and I wasn't about to start. When's your audition? Josie asked. Tomorrow night at 9. Josie put a hand to her mouth. Tomorrow is a full moon night, she croaked. I gulped down the creeped out reaction crawling up my throat. These were just folk tales. The mother elves were full of them. I didn't mean they were true. Lugaloo or no Lugaloo, I was going to do whatever it took to be a Zombies drummer. What else will Serge discover about the Lugaloo? Find out in The Sound of Magic, Book 2. The End.